Hi everybody. This is just an update, so I'm going to try and keep it fairly short. Thank you for those of you that have sat through the long presentation, an hour and 48 minutes. It's a mammoth one, but those of you that have sat through it, I think you realise why. The evidence is pretty clear, but I do realise that there's a lot of people that are not going to sit through a video that long. I probably would struggle to sit through it myself if I didn't know what it was about. So what I need to do is break that down into sections to make them shorter so that more people do get to see it, because it is important. So I will probably break it down into a video about Michael Massey, make a separate one with similar information about race control, make one about the steward's knowledge and also Red Bull's knowledge. Now, believe it or not, I missed out a few slides that I'd intended to put in. I'm just going to pause it just to flick screens. So there was a couple of slides that I'd thought I'd prepared, but clearly weren't in there, which detailed Red Bull's knowledge of the safety car and how they'd benefited from it in between 2012 and 2019. And them details weren't in the PowerPoint presentation, so I need to add them in. And I was also going to link it to this, which is the official FIA document. I'll scroll to the top to show you. You've seen this in one of my other, two of my other videos. The official FIA document, the steward's report into the Mercedes appeal, where they've dismissed Mercedes appeal. So as you go down, it tells you, some of you have seen this already, it shows you the procedure, it shows you who were there, it shows you what Mercedes were appealing. And this in itself is something that has been normalised, which is in no way normal. Red Bull's argument in defence. Now, again, nobody has actually even questioned this. There's nobody in the media that has done any form of article whatsoever to say, what on earth is going on here? Now, if you take the game of football, for example, football doesn't have a post-match appeal system, all right? But if it did, the appeal, you'd be appealing to, for example, in the UK, you'd be appealing to the FA, saying to the FA, the referee made an error and we therefore need to appeal something to appeal what the referee has done in that game. Now, for example, if a challenge took place out of the penalty area and the referee awarded a penalty for it, if you had the evidence to clearly show that, and there was an appeal process, you'd appeal to the FA, the Football Association, and say, Football Association, the referee has clearly made a wrong decision there, and we need some action taking to amend that. If it was a game, for example, Manchester City versus Liverpool, and let's say Manchester City were the team that felt that they were aggrieved and had this penalty wrongfully awarded against them, you wouldn't get Liverpool in that appeal going, yeah, but, because they're no part of that appeal. It was clearly the aggrieved party presenting their argument to the adjudicators for the adjudicators to decide the merits of the situation. Okay, this isn't a situation where it is a clash between drivers and drivers giving their explanation as to how they viewed the situation. This is clearly a case of saying these are the rules of the sport, and your official has broken the rules of the sport. And it's a simple case of the adjudicators comparing what was done with what the rules of the sport are, and saying, well, and let's be clear, it is clear, yes, you're quite correct, Mercedes. He has broken the rules of the sport, and therefore your appeal is valid. And therefore, under this appeal system, then we have to carry out the process correctly and uphold your appeal. And the correct action to take is the action that you have requested, which is to amend the race result. So that is how the appeal system should work. However, what's happened is it's been normalised. It's been normalised to say Red Bull's argument in defence. Red Bull should not even be there. And like I say, that hour 40 odd minute long video, I was going to link this in, and it would have taken over 2 hours had I have done. But you know, we get this. Any doesn't mean all. Now I'm going to do a detailed explanation of this. They've in 199 Grand Prix, 198 of them, Red Bull had never queried the wording of the regulations. So therefore it was accepted. They'd experienced the number of safety car deployments, they'd seen what had happened, they'd not queried the process. So that's an acceptance of them being what they are. They'd experienced the number of safety car deployments, which I think stood at, off the top of my head, was 49 or something like that. And they've experienced the times where their own competitors have benefited from it. And they didn't query the rules then. So again, that's acknowledge, that's acceptance of it. So now you've got to actually understand what's going on here. You don't magic up out of thin air an argument to validate it. Because in those last few laps of Abu Dhabi, Jonathan Wheatley didn't get the sporting regulations out, go down the safety car rules, which again I will do. I'm going to keep this video short, but I'm going to go down the safety car rules and show you exactly what they are. We'll read them through together, and you'll see what they are and what they refer to. You're not going to do that and then go, oh, this word any, that doesn't mean all. We can use that as a defence. Okay, in order to do that, there has to be a degree of premeditation. You're not just going to pick out the rules and regulations at that stage of a Grand Prix and go, oh, well, you can do this, and we'll say that the reason you can do this is because any doesn't mean all. That is not authentic conduct in the slightest. Now there'll be people that will jump up in the comment section and try and argue otherwise, but we know who they are. Anyway, this number 2, Article 48.13 of the regulations state that the message safety car in this lap is a signal that will enter the pit lane. Okay, your point 2 is just stating one of the regulations. Well done, Red Bull. Okay, and then you say, and therefore Article 48.13 overrides 48.12. And again, we'll go through them regulations, and what it is a sequence of procedures. And we will show you that each one in that list doesn't override the previous one. You just do each one in turn. That's the way it is. It's a list of things. And if you don't do 48.12, you've broken the regulations. You know, there's no notion of, oh, 48.3 overrides 48.12. Well, no, you can't do 48.13 until you've done 48.12. So it doesn't override it at all. And then Article 15.3 gives the race director overriding authority over the use of the safety car. And I've explained this multiple times, whereby that overriding authority extends to safety, where he can keep it out on track if he feels that it's not safe to resume racing, or it extends to sporting fairness. And again, we're going to get the people that don't understand sporting fairness. They don't understand that in every sport, the rules and regulations of the sport are written for sporting fairness. they don't understand the concept, but again, we know who they are. So the use of the safety car, his overriding authority of it, extends for the purpose of safety and for the purpose of sporting fairness. Hence the fact that Michael Massey himself kept the safety car out on track lapping, which is over and above what 48.12 says, because 48.12 I believe is the one that says the safety car, once a last lapped car has passed the leader in the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Okay, and there were 4 races which I've done videos about whereby Massey has kept that safety car on track for an additional lap. Charlie Whiting did that in 2018 as well. I believe it was the German Grand Prix, the one that Felix Holter was the steward at. So this is a known thing. They kept it out on track for more than one lap in the early days. You know, in 2012, 2013, 2014, that was common. And then they've tried to shorten the process down, so then they restricted it to 1 lap. But what they've done, they've also acknowledged the implications of that. That being, even if you've just given the released cars 1 lap, if they're left in a position whereby after 1 lap they've only made it half a way around the track, and for example the first of those released cars is further behind the car they were previously chasing than they were before the safety incident occurred, you're allowing a safety incident to disadvantage them. And this is the evolution of process and rules, whereby over time they'll look at the situation and they'll realise the impact that it's having, and therefore they'll adjust things. And so what we saw from 2012, 2013, 2014 was it was frequent that the safety car would stay on track for 2 or 3 laps after the lapped cars were released. And then we saw the regulations change, where it says the safety car will return to the pits at the end of effectively just 1 safety car lap after they've been released. But then we've gone back to sometimes seeing 2 laps. Again, there's a reason, and that reason is looking at the positions of those cars prior to the incident and then trying to ensure that they're not disadvantaged from that point when racing is resumed. Ideally, they want to get them all back to the back of the pack so they're all in a line, as demonstrated in all of them slides. Okay, because that's the correct ideal restart conditions, but they won't always wait long enough to achieve that if they feel it's dragging on too long. And as long as the cars that haven't quite caught up aren't further back than what they started prior to the incident, then they will use discretion to say, right, they're close enough now, they've not been disadvantaged, off we go. So again, that is the notion of the discretion. And you go to Red Bull's 5th point. Even if all cars that had been lapped, 8 in total, of which 5 were allowed to overtake, it would not have changed the outcome of the race. That is just a complete diversionary tactic, because it's irrelevant, because it doesn't matter whether you'd have released 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 of them cars. If you've not released 8 of them cars, you've not fulfilled the regulation. Okay, the regulation is once the last lapped car, so you've not released all 8, so therefore you've broken the regulation. And for them to say, oh, even if all 8 had gone, it wouldn't have changed the outcome, that the outcome is determined by the fact you have to release the 8 cars, and then you have to do that mandatory safety car lap. And you have to do that mandatory safety car lap, and it ends up being a safety car finish because that mandatory safety car lap takes you to the end of lap 58. There is no more racing. So therefore, it's a safety car finish. The order of those cars does not change. Lewis Hamilton is in the lead. So 0.5 by Red Bull is a total diversion. Okay, trying to totally divert from the fact that you've not completed this mandatory safety car lap. And, that is the point that they put forward. So you go down that list of 5, and the only thing that is in any way truthful is 2. But all that is a statement of what the rules say. But that's a rule whereby the previous regulation wasn't followed. So it's irrelevant. Well done, you've stated a regulation, but we're not arguing about that. We're saying that 14.12 wasn't completed, and therefore you can't even do 14.13. And it doesn't override at all, because that's not how it works. If you then go down to the race director's evidence, so this is what Michael Massey said. The race director stated that the purpose of 48.12 was to remove those lapped cars that would interfere in the race between the leaders. It's not the purpose. As I've demonstrated on several times, probably done 20 videos of it so far, I could do 50. I could do, there's the videos that I've done, and some of them have only got 100 to 200 views. And what they are the safety car incidents dating back as far as 2012 and working my way through. I've done them season by season, and there's about 4 or 5 seasons I've not yet done, but they're all pretty much the same. They all show you the same process. They all show you pretty much that Martin Brundle lies about the purpose and lies about the fact that it's an optional regulation. The race director doesn't have to do this. He's either lying to hype up the show, or he just doesn't know. Now, you can't use he doesn't know as an excuse. Ignorance is not an excuse for giving misinformation. He's presented as the expert of the sport. Him and Crofty on live commentary with Brundle has stated that it's new regulations for 2012. Now, therefore Martin Brundle is aware that it's a new regulation for 2012. If a new rule or regulation is introduced into a sport and you are the sports expert commentating to the world on that sport, it is your responsibility, your duty, to familiarise yourself with what that is, what the implications are, what its purpose is, so that you can articulate that to the fans of the sport. If you didn't know, if you didn't understand, what you do, you speak to Charlie Whiting. And we know from the way he speaks in commentary, he used to speak to Charlie Whiting. So if you didn't understand what was going on, then you find out what's going on. You educate yourself. The other thing is, the sport itself has a responsibility. So the sport itself will watch the broadcasting, they'll listen to the commentary. If that commentary is giving misinformation, they have a responsibility to correct Brundle. They have a responsibility to correct Brundle and to educate viewers. The FIA did not correct Brundle, and they did not explain otherwise as to what he was saying. Brundle's superiors at Sky Sports F1 have a responsibility to the fans of the sport to educate them correctly about what the rules of the sport are. And what they've done, they've just allowed Brundle to keep lying about the sport, and the sole purpose is to hype the situation up. It's as simple as that. It's to try to keep people guessing. Oh, what are we seeing here? We're seeing a safety car. When are we going to get going? We're on the edge of our seats waiting because it can get going any moment now. Any moment now. We could see some more racing. When really, those of us that know what the sport is know that that's not true. And I'm not just making this up. I used to watch it, and when I heard stuff like that, I used to ignore it because I knew it was wrong. I never went into it to the depth that I've gone into it now because I didn't need to. I just knew it was wrong. And sure enough, he'd say it, I'd go, yeah, he's chatting shit. And then exactly what I knew was going to happen would happen. Never once did I see a race whereby Brundle said, oh, they don't have to let the lapped cars go. The race director doesn't have to do it. Because I didn't see that one in Singapore that I pointed out, the 2017 Singapore Grand Prix. But like I say, when you actually look at the regulations and you look at that situation within the race, you can determine how Charlie Whiting applied the regulation. Charlie Whiting's not here, okay? So how he made his decision there, you have to break that down and analyse it and come to your conclusions yourself. And you do that on the grounds of looking at the regulations, looking at the situation, and then determining how he did it. And like I say, if I'd got better footage, if I'd got tracker view, if I'd got more data, I could be more certain. And unfortunately, I'm reliant on the snippets of footage that F1 TV show about that instance. So I can't be 100% certain on that. But it would be possible to prove with 100% certainty whether what Charlie Whiting did was in accordance with the regulations if we've got the correct footage and data. But I believe I'm right in that. Okay, so that's just one occurrence in all that time with what appears to be valid reasoning for it in accordance with the regulations. And yet Brundle says the same thing time and time again. It doesn't say the same thing when it's Mark Webber in a Red Bull that in the first lap or two of the race, I think he gets a puncture. I'll show the incident. I've already done a video on it, but he gets a puncture or whatever it is, ends up a lap behind everybody at the back of the pack. And then they have a safety car incident. And from the back of the pack, he gets allowed to unlap and make it all the way around to the back of the pack. So being at the back of the pack, he is not interfering with the race between the leaders. So why is he released? He's released because it's the regulations. It's the fact that this is what they do. Okay? Had he been 2 laps behind, would they have given him 1 lap back? I don't know. Probably not. But the fact is, he was at the back of the pack. They released him. He made it all the way around to the back of the pack again, so he was on the same lap as every other car. And then they went racing again. And again, I'll evidence this. I think he finished 6th in that race. Okay? Don't have a photographic memory of all these things. I have to prepare the information or prepare the video and then play it through, and then you can see what happens. I do it in a way that you can see with your own eyes what is actually going on. Okay? And this is what Red Bull know. This happened for a Red Bull car in a race. So, you know, any does not mean all. Right? Okay. The race director states that the purpose was to remove the lapped cars that would interfere with racing between the leaders. You remove Webber, and he wasn't interfering with racing between the leaders, and he still had a race to race and ended up finishing in the points. As I've proven on so many occasions, this is what happens. Okay, it's because every competitor in a Grand Prix is a competitor that needs to be treated fairly, and therefore you cannot advantage some with a safety car and disadvantage others. The same conditions have to apply to all, which the regulations are written in the way that they are so that them conditions are achieved. And that's the purpose. Massey's demonstrated that he knows the purpose through his conduct with how he's operated the safety car. And as proven in all those slides in that long video, it proves that before going racing each time, Massey and the rest of FIA race control made sure that them cars that were in that Grand Prix were in a valid restart condition. That's a known thing by Massey. It's a known thing by them 10 people or however many there is, because again, we don't know the exact number, but we know it's at least 10 people in FIA race control. They all know that. But Massey is presenting in this steward's appeal a lie. Okay? And the stewards accepted it. Stewards that know it's a lie because they've witnessed with their own eyes Massey keeping that safety car out on track for an additional lap to enable those release cars to make it around to the back of the pack. So you're not giving them 2 laps to get out of the way. You're giving them 2 laps to make it around to the back of the pack. It is very simple. And the race director's evidence, the race director also stated that it had long been agreed by all teams that where possible, it was highly desirable for the race to end in green conditions, i.e. not under the safety car. Okay, that could be a desire, but where possible, it wasn't possible. Okay, where possible doesn't mean you can break the rules of the sport to achieve a desire. Doesn't mean that, does it? Where possible means, you know, how do you come up with an example for this? You know, sport, people like to be entertained by sport. That's why people watch sport. When you watch a football match, you can be entertained sometimes by a game ending 0-0. It can still be a good game. Sometimes a 0-0 draw can seem a bit boring. So there's games where we like to see goals. So you might have an agreement between the teams saying, oh, it would be desirable between the teams if there are goals in this game. Okay, that's a desire. That would make the thing, probably more people would be entertained if there were goals in the game. Doesn't mean the referee can break the rules of the sport to manufacture goals, does it? You know, so this highly desirable, fine, you can, I think that's a given. Ideally, you want to see the car still racing when it gets to the checkered flag. But if circumstances happen in that race that mean that that's not possible, you don't break the rules just to make that happen. But here's the key as well. They broke the rules knowing full well what they were setting up. It wasn't breaking the rules in a evenly contested situation. That in itself would have been wrong anyway. Don't get me wrong, breaking the rules to manufacture a dramatic finale is wrong, and it's also fraudulent. It's not conducting the event in accordance with the rules of the sport. But why it makes it a fix is because the rules were broken, they knew they were breaking the rules, and they knew what they were doing and what they were setting up by breaking those rules. They knew full well who was significantly advantaged and who was likely to win the outcome of what they were setting up, illegally setting up. Even in commentary, I'm sure Brundle used the words, and we'll go through this again, Hamilton will be a sitting duck on those tyres. The watching world knew that. The watching world knew what to expect if it was possible to go racing again, because of the advantage that those fresh soft tyres gave a car. That's what they used for their qualifying laps. Funny that. And the sports officials broke the rules of the sport to set that up. They all knew what they were doing. Red Bull knew what they were doing. They knew what their radio messages were requesting. But in advance of all of this, what you were watching on the TV wasn't authentic, and what the sports commentators were saying was not in accordance with the rules. All it was doing was it was conditioning the uninitiated viewer and the fanboys that, again, they don't know the rules of the sport. They don't know, and if they've only been watching it and just been listening to what's presented by Brundle, they believe Brundle. They believe when Brundle says it's not mandatory, they could go racing again, leaving the lapped cars in place. You absolutely cannot. But there's many people will just take that on face value and accept it. An expert of the sport is telling them this, so this must be right, right? They don't have the ability to look at the situation and determine for themselves whether that's valid or not. Nobody read the rules and regulations of the sport prior to Abu Dhabi. I didn't. But it didn't mean I didn't know what the sport was about. We've had to read them since to actually produce the evidence that we are. And now we're all familiar with them. And we all know that they were broken. So this is how they've conditioned people. They've lied to people. They've known that people will just absorb it. They'll just take it. They'll accept it. They'll believe it. Everything that was being fed through their TV screen kind of correlated with that. The important thing wasn't being shown. We didn't get anywhere near enough of the footage of what was going on at turn 14. Because again, that is the bit that determines whether it's even possible to release those lap cars prior to the end of lap 56. And the simplicity of it is, if you cannot release all of them cars by the end of lap 56, it's a safety car finish. It's as simple as that. And nobody has ever stated that simple fact. And there's a reason. There's a reason. They set it up. They set it up. There was a clear narrative of making sure that final lap happened and happened the way it did. So that's fixing. That's race fixing. I promise to try and keep this one short. I'm mindful it's just turned into another long monologue. But we're going to, I'm going to do, like I say, break down the long video into sections that hopefully people can palette. Add a few more details that I missed out as well on those. And then there's the other stages as well, because this was building up to the 8-part series that I was doing to say that in order for this to happen, let's be clear, in order for this fix to take place, there had to be numerous things that had to happen in order for them to get away with it. You can't just do something without the other steps. So I want to take you through all the steps that they had to do and did do, which has enabled them to get away with it so far. So once I need to evidence things in between each stage, and then I can produce the video as part of that 8-part series, so that I can fall back and show you this is what they did, here is them doing that, and therefore this is how this is this step of their process. But like I say, there's various things I need to evidence at different times so you can see what they were doing as they were making this happen. Anyway, once again, thanks for your time, and hopefully have something for you fairly soon. Cheers.